Thank you guys for joining. My name is Dave Shankar. I'm Director of Platform Engineering, which is just an exaggerated title. I run the DevOps and Managed Services team at Kinect Consulting. And today we're going to be talking about the 6R classifications, or better 6R classifications. Is anybody here familiar with the 6R classification framework? So a couple years ago, AWS published a blog where they basically outlined, they created a framework to how you can classify applications and what the patterns would be to migrate those applications. And it helped tremendously of simplifying cloud migration projects, of figuring out what needs to be done in order to move certain applications. The problem is that how do you pick which one of the 6Rs you want to migrate to? And this is where New Relic comes in very helpful to it. So the first thing in any cloud migration that you want to do is do a portfolio discovery. You want to understand what applications you have in the cloud environment and what are their interdependencies. If you don't know what that is, then how can you migrate it? How can you say, I can lift and shift this server, or I can replatform this server, if you don't know what it talks to? And how do you prioritize that? If you had 10 servers, 5 of them running Windows with MS SQL, and 5 Linux servers running Tomcat, Java and Tomcat, and they're all talking to each other, you couldn't just take one and move it off because maybe the latency to the database server would be too high. So with you have to understand what you have and what those interdependencies are and what they're talking to. Once you understand that, you can outline which one of the 6Rs you can go into. So I think it's about 2 years ago, New Relic published that blog that I talked about. And these were the 6 that they came up with. They actually just updated that this week, and they added a second one that I never remember, so I wrote it down on my hand. So Relocate, and that particular one is based off of the VMware solution they provide, where they're just relocating VMware VMs from one cloud to the other. The ones that you see here, I'll walk through so you understand what they are. Rehosting, this is by far the most popular strategy used for migration. I think I was at a talk where AWS said 40% of cloud migrations follow this pattern. And it's simply a lift and shift. Those 10 servers I was talking about, you can use AWS products like server migration services to replicate the data over into AWS. And once it's fully replicated, you can switch DNS to that solution and turn down your other solution, and voila, you're running in the cloud. It doesn't require much solutioning or much changes, especially not application changes. And like I said, by far, this is the most popular solution. With replatforming, though, it's very similar to the previous one, except for you're now modifying certain aspects of that solution in order to make it work. So those 10 servers, I talked about MS SQL running in that environment. Well, instead of replicating that over using SMS or Cloud Endure or whatever solution you have, let's use a solution like DMS to replicate the data over into RDS. And now I can use a managed service offering for MS SQL and not have to worry about the management, the operations, and all that stuff as much as I do. I have a tangible benefit from doing that. From moving that over. Those Linux servers, rather than replicating the Linux server data by data, I can move that into something like Elastic Beanstalk, which is a managed service. And now, same thing, I have a tangible benefit behind deployment, CI/CD. I can use Elastic Beanstalk for, and I don't have to worry about all the operational issues I would if I'm just managing those. And that's what replatforming is. It's making subtle changes to the environment. No, you're not making tons of code changes or very little code changes. You're just lifting and shifting. The application is running the same way, but you're taking advantage of some cloud native environments. So actually, let me go back here. Where I said rehosting is the most popular one, 40% of cloud migrations go down this path. 30% of cloud migrations go down this path. So 70% of all cloud migrations follow these two, rehosting and replatforming. The next biggest one is refactoring, and when I say biggest, I'm talking about the effort that goes into it. This is really just re-architecting your entire application, redeveloping in some cases to be extremely cloud native, and taking advantage of all the cloud features that are there. So for example, I may start using all serverless technologies, and because I'm serverless, I now can scale up and out very easily. I'm stateless and taking advantage of that, and I'm building a pipeline that gets my code out there, and I'm able to take advantage of all of that. But it's no lift and shift, and usually this takes way longer than some of the other strategies that we looked at. Now, the other three I won't talk too much: retain, repurchase, and retire. Retain is you do nothing. And this is used in cases where it's an environment such as a AIX server or a Solaris server where there's no equivalent to run. You need that server running. It's a legacy server, so you leave it running where it is, or you move it into a colo facility, or you downsize your rack and move everything else and leave that running. Repurchasing is where you just find another product. You've been running a CRM on a server inside your data center, and you decide to move to Salesforce. And for that, you're not migrating the solution. You're just buying another product to implement that. And then retire. That's where you're just taking it out back and killing it. Or as my colleagues over here are going to do to me if I make any mistakes in this conference. So the question is, how do you classify these things? How do I know what apps to move first? How do I know which Rs do I need to go into? And how do I know if I'll get better performance in the cloud? And this is where New Relic shines. With their product suite, APM, infrastructure, and synthetics, I can start setting my baseline and collect this information. APM can start seeing all the things your application is doing, how it's performing, what type of requests are coming in, and more importantly, what your application is talking to. With infrastructure, I can now start seeing the workloads that your infrastructure is running. So I can tell the virtual machine is 2 CPUs and it's running at 10% utilization. But more importantly, I can now see what the patch level is. It's a Windows 2018 server running whatever patch level, and it has these executables on it. New Relic Infrastructure Agent gives me all that information. And Synthetics is one of the most underrated New Relic products, I think. With Synthetics, I can create a script that runs against my application as a customer would run. So I could see what that customer performance is. I might have sub 10 milliseconds response times when it comes to executing transactions. But if on the UI side I have things that are blocking and the customer is not able to log in very fast or experience a fast login, I might be turning away customers by that. I won't find that with APM necessarily or infrastructure. Synthetics helps me determine that. So by using these products, I can create that baseline and understand what's there and how it's performing. And with APM, I can also gather dependencies. This is one of the biggest problems we have when doing any cloud migrations, understanding what those servers are talking to, what they need to move with it, and what we don't need to move as well. With the service map feature in New Relic APM, it's kind of hard to see. But in this application, I can see that I'm talking to an external API, I'm talking to another API, internal API here, and I'm talking to a bunch of databases. Those 5 Linux servers that are running Tomcat, they may be talking to 5 different database servers. That means I have to move everything all at once or find a way to combine the databases or when I do that migration. I wouldn't know this very easily just by looking at the app. This is where this gives me that information and just makes it that much easier. So once I can have that data, I can classify those applications and start the migration process. But that's not where New Relic's feature set stops. At migration time, I can build a dashboard that's showing me the current performance of the application, and as I migrate it, I can see what that application is performing in the cloud. Now, we're all human, and I make tons of mistakes. I might have forgotten to open up a firewall to allow external access to an API that's needed. As I start moving customers to that, in New Relic, I'll start seeing those errors pile up, and I can revert back and move it back, fix those errors very easily, and then come back in and do the migration itself. It's funny, Emily and I were talking about a previous engagement that we did on a cloud migration project, and I had this problem as well, where we moved the workload over into the cloud, but the instances were undersized and things were failing. And immediately within 10 minutes, I was able to revert back, had the team write some automation scripts to upsize those instances, utilizing the cloud to throw up 400 new instances, shut down the old ones, and do the migration again. Within 30 minutes, we fixed the problem, migrated into, finished our migration, and were able to go have a beer at the local bar. But that's not where it ends as well. Once you've done the migration, you want to validate that you're performing better, or at least better, or at least at the same level. And this is where the SLA reports in New Relic comes in handy. I can see the performance from release, from days, from weeks, how it was performing from a transactional standpoint, how it was performing from a response time standpoint, from a database standpoint. I can see that here, and then on the day that I switched over, I can see what those response times are. We've actually seen in some cloud migrations that we'll see additional requests coming in because now the solution is operating faster, where there was a bottleneck we didn't see before, and now we're getting more requests for something, and the response time is going down because now the average is going down. But using that data, we can also use it, leverage that data to optimize the solution. That same scenario we're talking about where I threw up 400 new instances because the instance type that I picked before wasn't right. Well, after we launched and a couple days later, we decided let's try and downsize these instances, save some money. When we went to go downsize it, we went down a quarter in the instance size. They were a quadruple X large. We went to just a small instance or a large instance. And we were able to cut the cost there, but also use this to validate that we didn't see any increase in response times or any issues or any problems related to that. So final thoughts. You want to categorize your applications up front. New Relic can definitely help with that and make life easier. You want to create that baseline that you can track through your cloud migration journey and ensure that you're not affecting performance. And the great thing about that is you can provide that dashboard to your business, so you no longer have to field calls of, hey, how are we doing, or hey, this customer's reporting this issue. You can just provide that and point your business team to that dashboard and say, hey, there might be an error there, but right now we're not seeing anything. We need to dive further in. And then after the migration, you want to use New Relic to continue optimizing, cutting your costs, cutting any or removing any issues, and what I call it the New Relic Ninja, and resolving any issues that they have there. So that's it for me. If you have any questions, we're at booth 217. Here's my contact information, and I'd love to take any questions if you have right now.